Hello, book reading friends. We're back at it with another update. There's a lot on here, mostly because I realized I forgot a couple of small prequel novellas and things in my last update, so I'm just going to put them on here. Also, I had a week of snow days to deal with. I don't normally work on Fridays, but we had a Friday snow day. Monday was a planned day off. Tuesday, we made up Friday's schedule because our school does this neat thing where they do block schedules on Thursday and Friday was the end of the semester, supposed to be. So they had to do that block schedule on Tuesday. Since I don't normally work Fridays because I'm not needed for the schedule, I wasn't needed Tuesday, and then we had snow days Wednesday and Thursday. So I had a whole week's worth of school days off. So I did a lot of reading, especially because one of the reasons we had those days off is the weather wasn't the greatest. So curled up with a blanket and a good book for most of those days. So there was a lot on my list. A couple of them are ones I forgot to mention in my last update. A couple of them are novellas, really not novels. And one I'm about 3 pages away from finishing. So it's not officially done, but it's done enough that I can give you my impression of it. So we're going to jump right in. These first two are ones I forgot in the last update, so I'm just going to jump on them real quick here. The Amaral Company, which is a novella prequel by Andrew Mark Rowe. Holy cow. It's a fantasy. This king has been killed. He was a king, but also divine. He had some divine powers. He had been sort of touched, spoken to, interacted with this divine being who imbued him with special powers. But there are those who want things to go back to the way they used to be. And basically, he's destroyed from within. He's dead at the beginning of the novella. And the Amaral Company is his select guard unit, and those that took him down are seeking to wipe out this guard unit. Andrew Mark Rowe keeps nobody safe, so you'll be reading along and you'll start to get attached to a character, and suddenly they'll get surprised and jumped and killed, and they're just gone, and you've lost to them, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's the beginning, like I said, it's the prequel to the Yoga trilogy. I have the rest of the trilogy to read. Definitely a high priority on my TBR. But just really action-packed, quality world building. And I loved the fact that Rowe was able to give you enough of the story without having these long, dry expositional passages. I know that the king had been imbued with divine power. I know things have been shaken up so bad that this man who was a demigod is now mortal. And he's trying to intervene on behalf of the people who worshipped him when he became a demigod. He went from being human to a demigod, and now he's back to being human again. But he actually feels compassion for the people that worshipped him, so he's trying to do what he can to return the world to what it was. So yeah, it was action packed from the get go. The king was already dead. 2 members of the Amaral Company were trying to find others of their number, but stay under the radar so they didn't get attacked or found or whatever. There are some purely evil characters and some characters of dubious, questionable morality, which is kind of like life. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to get into the rest of the trilogy. There are some other things I'm arcing that I have deadlines to get done, so I've kind of had to sit the rest of this series off to the side a bit, but it's on my radar. It's there. It's ready to be attacked. This next book, I was really torn. I didn't give it a great rating when I reviewed it. I think I gave it a 2 or a 3. It's called Long Live Dead Reckless by Safari Spell. It's the first book in a series called Long Live Dead Reckless. I loved her characters. She knows how to develop well-rounded, multi-dimensional characters that at one moment you're cheering for them, the next moment you're frustrated with them. They're like real people. They have good days and bad days. They have smart choices and dumb choices. And I loved everything about her characters. Number one, it's supposed to be a story about something supernatural. The band Dead Reckless is made up of a group of people that are not entirely human, and I don't want to give away any spoilers. One of them falls in love with this girl who apparently his father, who is a supernatural being, has already staked a claim on. It all got very confusing and disjointed after that. It took a while for the supernatural elements of the story to show up, which I didn't mind because in that time that she was building up to that, I was getting these really quality characters. I was really getting to know the individuals within the book. So I was kind of torn because the story left me very confused and wasn't satisfying at all. But the characters were so engaging and so well developed. So I definitely would give the second book in the series a chance only to see if she can straighten out some of my confusion from the first book. And a lot of it is because these four members of this band know things, and so they talk with knowledge that the main character, the main female character, and thus the reader don't possess. So that could be an intentional um, mechanism on the author's part. But I loved the characters. I absolutely loved how well developed they were. So I would give the second book in the series another chance, even though I found the story really confusing to follow, just because Safari Spell created such amazing characters. Um, this next one actually helped me complete the book quest, which what a great reading challenge. Shout out to the Paper Tavern for their book quest part one. Um, what a fun, I love a checklist. I love a let me see my progress, let me see, a little growth chart or whatever. They create they created this great little tracker that was absolutely so much fun to work with. Um, You loaded your books into your TBR, and it came up with a black and white graphic of the cover of your novel. Now, they were pulling from Google Books, so they had to figure out what to do for those of us that were reading books that weren't for sale on Google Books, because I was reading a couple more obscure titles. But they figured it out, so I was able to manually load those and find the image on the internet and load it. So the cover of the book loads as a little black and white icon. And as you read, like I would go in and say, I am 35% done with whatever title. Then when I went back to my bookshelf, that cover would fill with color. The bottom 35% of the cover would fill with color. It was the cutest thing. I used to go look at my shelf just to watch the colors fill. It was great. So you kind of, as you finished a book, the cover would completely color. It was great. So it was fun. Short little read. Some of them, this one book was a short little read, and it filled the. I took some liberties with it. It filled the animal sidekick because some of the characters in the book are wolf shifters. There's a witch and a wolf shifter and a human and a female wolf shifter. Yeah, called Midnight Scoundrel, the second book in the I think it's Lunaria series by Rebecca Main. I enjoy her sassy females. I enjoy her sassy, opinionated, not going to take crap from anybody females. So it's a quick, easy read. It's like a 200-page paranormal romance book. She does a beautiful job of tying in with the romance. There's always an outside conflict. I had already read the first book in the series entitled The Coven, and there is a rival wolf pack that is this rival wolf pack wants to go back to the old ways of doing things where the females in the pack have no choice and just sort of get to be ruled over. Never mind that the females are manipulating things in that pack to their own advantage anyway, but the men think they're in charge. And the pack featured in this particular book doesn't want to do things that way. They want to be a little more modern about the way they find their mates and things. So yeah, there's a running conflict with this other wolf pack that shows up in both of the books so far. I haven't read the rest of the series yet. So I took liberties with Midnight Scoundrel and made that my animal sidekick because two of the male characters, one of the female characters are wolf shifters. One of the female characters is a witch, and one is just a human. There's nothing unique and special about her. So she was kind of my favorite because she stood up to all of them really, really well, even though she possessed no special supernatural powers of any kind. This next book was an arc, not the type of book I normally go after, but something about this one intrigued me, and so I did. It's sort of one of those spy thriller genre types called John Raider by Ian Query, sorry. It is the first, I believe, in a series. I know book 2 is out in February, I think, or late this month, or maybe just came out. John Raider, the book starts. This was my week to find books that just jumped into the action from the first page. The book starts with John climbing out of a car wreck. The car he's been driving has hit a tree. He hit his head so hard he doesn't remember who he is. He doesn't remember who the woman in the passenger seat is. He doesn't remember what was happening before. So he gets out of the car, goes around to inspect the car, sees bullet holes. Doesn't know how he knows they're bullet holes, but he knows they are. The woman that was riding with him is dead. He doesn't know who she is, who she was to him. Were they colleagues? Was he helping her? Is she a lover? He doesn't know. So he follows what instincts he has, stays off the main roads, manages to find his way to some things that look familiar, he finds an address that he goes to and the person there knows him. So he manages to sort of start piecing his life back together. But his biggest challenge is somebody shot at this car before it went off the road. So obviously he's got an enemy or two out there, or she did. He just needs to figure out what's going on. So part of the book is him trying to figure out who was shooting at who. Were they trying to kill her or him or both of them, and why? Police corruption comes into play, taking payoffs from the mob. It's a whole big, dark, sort of I want to say police thriller, but he's not a police officer. He's technically a PI. Definitely not the kind of book I go after normally. I do like a good murder mystery, but this one was very, very heavy with the intrigue and espionage and betrayal and all of that. But definitely worth the read. Definitely, I intend to um, put myself out there to see if I can arc the second book in the series because it was just the characters were multidimensional. A lot of books like this, they can make the main character the tragic hero with the heart of gold, the guy who's hard and difficult to get to know because he's been so broken in his past. This guy has some genuinely touching moments. So I enjoyed everything about this book. I definitely intend they I have a feeling that there will be elements of the first story that show up in the second one because not all of the bad guys were completely dealt with in the first book. There were still some dirty cops on the force. At the end of the story, basically, John has sort of a you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone kind of deal. But I have a feeling that could come up again in the second book. So I look forward to hopefully getting to arc the second book as well. Um, this was also a month or a week for a lot of arcs for me. I tend to get myself into a lot of them anyway because I search some of them out on websites, which is not my smartest move. Because then I look at my list and go, why do I have so many books to arc? Oh, yeah, you signed up for most of them, idiot. So this is one. I also get several emails. The majority of my email traffic right now is author newsletters because I'm that nerd. This is one I had the chance to arc at the. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to come back to that minute because it's the most recent one I read. Jumping back to the book Quest, The Body Farm by Patricia Cornwell. You had to read a hardback book. This qualified, and I'm trying to work my way back through her Case Scarpetta books just to get caught up. The mysteries in most of these books can stand alone. Later on, you'll see some of the same perpetrators come back, some of the same suspects show up again, and Kay's life starts to play more of a role. Her life as the medical examiner, her friends that work for the FBI, her niece works for the FBI, that all starts to play into some of the crimes that she's dealing with as a medical examiner. Um, so knowing what's going on with her life in chronological order is helpful when you get to some of the later books in the series. So I'm just refreshing my brain as to what's happened because it's been a while. I walked away from reading these books for a while. Not that I don't love them, I just got distracted by other stuff. So one of my goals in 2020 is to get current with hers, John Sanford's. Last year I managed to catch up on Janet Ivanovich's, so I'm all caught up on her Stephanie Plum series. I just need to get myself caught back up on Patricia Cornwell and John Sanford. And so Patricia's my focus this year. I'm gonna do what I can with the John Sanford's Lucas Davenport series, and we'll go from there. Um, Another book that I read for the book quest, and it's sort of a bittersweet read because it's the last in the series, and I loved the series. So it's that whole, oh, I have to let my friends go. Book 5 in the Tales of Zeladia, the Emperor's Doom. We have followed the same 3 characters and all of their friends and enemies for 5 books as Brina, Amanki, and Moshi have been trying to bring these prophesied seals to the capital city to put the rightful emperor on the throne. The prophecy spoke of the end of days. Now, for a long time, they took that part of the prophecy to mean the end of the reign of an evil emperor. Zoltov was evil. So at the end of book 4, Zoltov has been assassinated very publicly, and the rightful king, the son of the brother of the man who was emperor, takes the throne and finds it a lot harder to manage a kingdom than he thought it would be. The end of days, spoiler alert, actually means that the capital city is going to be wiped off the map. There's an earthquake followed immediately by a flood, and the capital city is just gone. These 3 prophesied individuals have figured it out. They're trying to ward people to get them out of the city, and they do save several. And then they set up a new community, a new city, and begin rebuilding from there. But it was hard to read this one and finish it because it's a series I've loved. R.A. Denny knows how to build a fantasy world, let me tell you. The 3 main characters, one was called a glider. Brina lived in trees. She doesn't fly, she can glide, so she can go from one level to a level slightly below, gliding. She has these membranes basically that attach from her wrist to her ankles. So when she holds her arms out, she glides and rides the wind currents. A monkey is what the people in Zeladia call a duck person. His toes are webbed, so he's a killer swimmer and a great fisherman and is very, very at home in the water. And then Moshoi is what they call part of the rock people. Think human armadillo hybrid is the way my brain worked, and they had illustrations in each of the novels, and that's kind of the way he looked. he could roll in on himself, and he grew. That wasn't something he wore. His people grow these rock-like scales on their backs, so if they have to, they can curl in on themselves, protect all the soft tissue targets, and their backs are impenetrable. So those are the three main characters we encounter. R.A. Denny is another one of those that doesn't keep characters safe. There were some characters I spent 4 books getting to know and falling in love with, only to lose them in book 5, and I was a little bit peeved. Characters that had fought through all sorts of things and then end up succumbing to this disease that's running rampant because the emperor won't allow help. Anyway, so yeah, it's kind of a bittersweet book for me because I've loved the series. I've started it about a year and a half ago, got distracted, got back into the series, and finished it finally with this book. So I'm a little sad because I loved it. The group book for the book quest was one I had heard of. It had sort of, I don't know about you, but I have those books that kind of, they don't necessarily automatically land on my TBR, but they live kind of in the vicinity of my TBR. I hear the name often enough, and I kind of like, if my TBR is here, I tuck that book in right over here, or right over here. Like, it's right there. It's TBR adjacent. This was one of those. So when I did the book quest and went, well, okay, now I have to read it because it's the group book for the book quest. I'm so glad I did. It's the first book in a series. Camelot Rising, I believe, is the name of the series. The Guinevere Deception by Kirsten Wright. Can we talk about that cover art? Tell me Guinevere doesn't look like she could seriously take on just about anybody. In this twist on the Arthur Camelot tale, Guinevere is not Guinevere. The real Guinevere has died. But Merlin has stepped in using a girl that appears to be. They don't come right out and say she's his daughter, but that's the closest relation they ever hint at. But they don't ever categorically say yes. And even she, when she's thinking about him, doesn't always think about him as her father. So we're not really sure what the relationship was, but she's magical. And she's what they call a changeling in the book. And so Merlin manages to manipulate the memories of everybody that knew the real Guinevere. Guinevere was living in a convent at the time in preparation for some reason to marry Arthur. I don't know why she had to live in a convent, but she did. And so he just replaces, when the real Guinevere dies, he just replaces her with this changeling and manipulates everybody's memories. So they believe that this Guinevere is the real one. And she goes off and marries Arthur. Arthur knows. Arthur's in on it. He knows the real Guinevere is dead. He knows that she's magical and is there to help him because there are magical threats at his borders. All magic in Camelot has been outlawed, which is why Merlin can't help him himself because everybody knows he's magical. Magic has been outlawed, therefore Merlin had to go. Their thinking is if they don't want evil magic to come in and wreak havoc, then they can't allow any magic at all whatsoever. I hope that makes sense. Sorry, I lost my list. Okay, these next ones were ones that I arced, all 3 of them. This is the one I started to talk about earlier and realized I was out of order. Brutal Prince by Logan Fox. Logan creates such great characters. This one is marketed as a high school bully romance. So I went in with a certain expectation about the title character. Ironically, he is not a prince. His name is Prince. Prince Briar. He hates the first name, so he tends to go by his last name. He hates his first name. It's a family name. All the men in his family are named that. His dad even goes by his middle name because his dad doesn't like the first name any better than he does. Logan writes great characters. She writes great surprise twists. She gives you a character that you think you've got figured out, and all of a sudden there'll be this twist, and you'll realize you didn't understand this character at all. The main characters in this book, as she has done before with other things I've read, a little broken. There's things in their past that have left them a little bruised and a little skeptical and a little afraid to open themselves up to others. He thinks he committed a horrible crime against another person, and that somebody else helped clean up his mess. The rest of the town thinks the girl committed suicide. Turns out he didn't do anything. He was completely guiltless, but this other person has let him believe for a while now that he did something horrible. The girl in the book, her name is Indy. Her name's Indigo. She hates it. She insists on going by Indy. Her father dies of cancer. She doesn't cope well with that. She becomes a rebellious little brat. And one night when she had snuck out to go to a party that she knew her mother would never let her go to, someone comes to the house and attacks her mother, rapes her, kills her, burns the house down to try to hide his tracks. So she's come to live with a grandmother she doesn't really get along with at all and doesn't really know very well. Um, and runs into this guy who tries to bully her, but realizes she's not going to be as easy to scare as he thought she would be. And of course, they're going to fall in love because it's a high school bully romance. But I read those sometimes a little bit of trepidation because falling in love with a guy who treats you like crap is not always, I mean, it's a sign of a really serious problem. Um, he slips out of that bully role pretty quickly. Others pick up on it and keep it going, but he starts to shift pretty fast. And his conversations with others, there are things in his past that he starts to deal with a lot sooner in the book than I expected him to. So Logan Fox, if nothing else, the romances are pretty predictable because the romance is always predictable. But Logan creates really, for me, in case you haven't learned by watching my videos, the character matters. She creates really good characters, really strong, solid. I don't want to say likable characters because they're not always likable, but sometimes they're exactly as much evil as you want them to be. Sometimes you hate them just the right amount because of the way she created them. This was another one I got a chance via an email to art this one for Enid Titan Devore. A little bit different space alien. Um, the main character had to give himself a name because the people on his planet don't refer to themselves as individuals. They would say, I am of Devore. I am from the planet of Devore. He finds the women in his on his planet have decided to sterilize themselves because they don't want to be used by men. The problem is this means the race is about to die out because there are no women having babies. He discovers that humans are fairly compatible, finds a mate for himself. He is the prince. He's the crown prince of the region. He rules Devore now. Um, there was a lot about it I liked. The characters were really well written. The one thing that didn't ring very true for me, and I said this in my review, um, he has a sister who's very, very much against this idea. She doesn't want a hybrid brat in her family. Now, when you talk to her about the fact that your entire race is going to die out here soon because the women have all sterilized themselves, um, doesn't matter to her. She's like, surely there's another alien race we can use because humans are they're so primitive, they're so underdeveloped and uncultured. They all communicate psychically. So when he brings this earthling woman to his planet and she keeps trying to talk to people out loud, she's considered excessively rude because they just don't do that. They communicate telepathically. They don't talk out loud. They can, they just don't. So luckily she has just enough psychic capability that she's able to tap into the energy that they're producing. And she ends up pregnant with his son. She falls in love with him. The conflict is not so much between the two of them as it is between her and his sister, who comes after them, tries to kill them, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, trying to figure out how to explain this. All of a sudden, she meets her nephew. She sees her nephew on a vid screen. He does something telepathically to his dad and his aunt. And all of a sudden, she's a doting auntie who loves her nephew. It's the first book in a series, the Alpha Quadrant series, and I'm hoping that there's an explanation later on. I would read the next book in the series just to see if they explain what Prometheus did, that his aunt suddenly went from wanting to kill him and his mother to my nephew, because there's no explanation given in the book. She just does a complete 180 and you don't know why. And that's the only thing that didn't ring true for me. I'm hoping there's an explanation later on so I could go, oh, okay, so when she grabs her head and is in pain because the child is communicating with her telepathically, this is why he showed her some sign of the future, and so she's happy now. And I don't know. It just didn't work for me at the moment, if that makes sense. Last one, I'm like 3 or 4 pages from finishing this one. More than that, maybe like a chapter, but I'm in love. Got this one off of the website called Edelweiss. It is an art request website. You go and request books to art. Nottingham, The True Story of Robin Hood by Anna Burke. Totally gender bent, queer Robin Hood. Robin is a woman. Robin's brother was executed for hunting in the sheriff's forest. In this novel, the sheriff, you're going to love this, the sheriff is Marian's father, not a man who's in love with her, because in every other retelling of Robin Hood, Robin and Marian are in love. The sheriff tries to ruin that because he wants Marian for himself. In this novel, Marian sees a couple of female friends engaged in a passionate moment and begins to question her own feelings and where her attractions lie. I was skeptical going in because I'm like, if they're going to give me a Sherwood Forest and a Nottingham, they're totally fine with same-sex relationships. That doesn't ring true historically at all for the era. And they don't. They comment on, these women have to live these lives in secret because they wouldn't be accepted. They comment on the fact that some women do get married and then bring along the women they're in love with as their handmaids or as a lady in waiting or whatever to keep the relationship going. And the husbands don't really care because if you're high enough up in the nobility, marriage is about financial security and gaining more land. And so they don't really care what she does once they're married. Um, but Robin is a woman who goes into hiding because she also is caught hunting on the sheriff's land, hunting in Sherwood Forest, by someone who was a friend, by someone who would offer to marry her if she would say yes. She's just not interested. And then she and Marian meet and are drawn to one another. Robin never, and again, Robin never struggles with the fact that she's attracted to this woman. It's for Robin, it's not an issue of, oh my gosh, why am I attracted to a woman? For Robin, it's, I'm an outlaw living in Sherwood Forest, trying to pass as a man so people don't take advantage of me. And when she finds Marian, she's dressed very nicely and is very obviously from a different class, a different social class than Robin. So Robin's problem is not that she's attracted to this woman. Robin's problem is she's attracted to a woman who's above her station. She's like, this is just has nightmare written all over it. It's going to be a disaster. There, spoiler alert: Little John is transgendered. Little John was born Joan and has transformed and prefers to go by John. Husband ended up dead. Husband was an abusive jerk who ended up dead, which is why John is living in the woods and not in a town. Because even though to the rest of the world, to those investigating the crime, John is Joan. Joan was a bigger woman who worked as a blacksmith alongside her husband, so she's definitely got the physical power to have killed him. So Robin figures it out, and she says, my husband, the man who was her husband used to call her Joan the Ox. I'm John. And so it's actually a friend of Robin's, a cousin of Robin's, who gives John the moniker Little John as a joke because John is not very little at all. And Midge is the only one that knows. They faked Robin's death. Midge is the only one that knows Robin is still alive and comes to visit on a regular basis just to give her updates and things. So I was very pleasantly surprised that they didn't try to rewrite history and these relationships are taking place sort of under the radar as much as they can. Tuck is a prioress, not a friar. So Tuck is a female. So as a woman, I loved the fact that Robin Hood's merry band are still doing all of the rob from the rich, give to the poor kind of thing, but it's a bunch of women doing it and one transgendered man. And it's not a group of men. These are not damsels in distress waiting to be rescued. These are women who are taking care of business and taking care of those in need and not sitting around waiting for a bunch of men to do it, which I kind of loved. So definitely a book worth picking up and reading. Like I said, I grabbed it as an ARC from Edelweiss and was intrigued. I love retellings no matter what. I love, even if I hate the overall outcome, I love it when people try to take and put a new spin on an old story because to me that shows that creative juices are constantly flowing. But this is a rewrite I think that worked really, really well. What's coming up for me? I have joined something called the Con Sabor reading challenge, which is a year-long reading challenge focusing on Latinx authors. I have become very intentional this year, wanting to have I want to add more authors of color to my reading list. I don't know why I couldn't come up with that faster. I want to add more Latinx authors, Black authors. I've been very intentional in going and finding material from the LGBTQ community. I think this is my third or fourth book just in January. I'm trying to get out of that rut of reading authors who are a lot like me. So I'm trying to stretch my horizons into maybe genres I don't normally read. I read a lot more graphic novels last year than I have in the past, and so I'm trying to keep pushing myself there. Political thrillers I don't read a lot of, so I need to keep pushing myself there. I don't want to become that person who's got like this tiny little bubble of books that I will read, so I'm trying to stretch my bubble. So I'm participating in a Blackathon in February, but I intend to keep reading Black authors beyond that readathon. It's just, for me, a great way to get me going and get me moving in the right direction. Bowties and Books is the web handle, the YouTube handle of the young lady who's handling the Blackathon. I'll try to remember to put her link in the description. The nice thing is, as a part of the readathon, she's created this Google document that she shares the link with you in her video description that has great suggestions for all sorts of genres with books written by Black authors. So I'm set. I've got a really nice list to jump from for her readathon and then for the rest of the year. But Con Sabor is going on all year long, and it's encouraging the reading of Latinx authors. All they do is suggest a book a month, and they don't even cover September or October or December. Now in September and October, there are Latinx readathons that already happen. So their thinking is they won't give you books for those months because they'd rather have you participate in those month-long readathons. December, they take off because that's the whole let me finish up my reading challenges and finish up my TBR. And so they just don't even bother with December. So I have added some titles to my my to be read list from there. The one I'm reading right now is called The Last Eight. Um, Aliens have landed, they're pulverizing humans into dust, and there are 8 individuals left alive, and they're all teenagers, and they all end up gathered in Area 51. The author is originally Bolivian, I believe. No, Brazilian. She's from Sao Paulo, Brazil. And the main character is a Latinx girl growing up in a Montana town, and she's the only Latinx girl in town. So even before the aliens land, we get a little bit of this. She's kind of set apart because nobody else is really like her. Nobody else understands her culture. So um, and then when she gets to Area 51, she discovers everything isn't quite what she's been told to believe. So I'm excited to finish reading that one. I've started it. My library had that and several other Latinx books that were on, again, suggested lists. But the Coastal War Reading Challenge, there are several, I think there's 3 individuals that are helping to manage that one, and they all have stuff on their website. So I'll try to remember to put one of them down in the description. If I forget, you can just Google Con Sabor, C-O-N, new word, S-A-B-O-R, reading challenge, and you'll get to their websites. Um, so that's where I am right now. I'm working on reading through The Last Eight. I've got some other library books checked out for year-long reading challenges and another Latinx book, a debut author by a Latinx author, or a debut book by a Latinx author that I've got sitting from the library too. So that's where we are. It'll be interesting to see. I'm way ahead of my challenge goal for Goodreads and that kind of thing. But I'm coming into musical season. A week from today, our first musical auditions happen. I have no idea what's going to happen as far as my reading time goes because I'll have a minimum of 9 hours of rehearsal time a week. So we'll see what happens with my reading time. But I'm way ahead of the game, and then I have the summer to catch up. So I'll eventually get all the books read I want to, plus probably a few extras. But I do know that going into musical season, things start to get a little tight as far as reading time goes. So that's where I am for right now. Those are the reading challenges I laid out in front of myself. I'd love to hear what you're reading, love to hear who your favorite new authors are. What was your favorite new book find from 2019? I'd love to know. Thanks.